welcome to the Delusion Rehab Podcast. My name is Lauren, and in case you missed out on the intro episode, I'll briefly share with you that I'm a young mom in her 30s, working full time in supply chain and part time as a health and mindset motivator. But behind the scenes of all that, my daily schedule includes me being on a hot pursuit of personal development and character change through God's special touch and purpose on my life. I've been awoken to the fact that I can be hardcore delusional. And if you're wondering if you might be a little delulu yourself, you're in good company because we are about to find this out together. I started this pod because there's been a passion of mine that's evolved in wanting to help others come to their own conclusions and reality checks uh, quicker than I did, hopefully, about some delusions that have stolen an unnecessary amount of joy and purpose filled living in my life because I actively chose to continue believing the lies. I mentioned it in my intro episode that the definition of a delusion is something that is a full on lie, and yet you still choose to believe it when the evidence around you suggests that it's a straight up lie. And I thought that believing those lies long enough would have me come to see the truth for what it was eventually, but not right now. And I'd live in the comfort of that. And maybe I would never have to grow as a person because I was just putting it off and putting it under the rug, so to speak. And here I am now, growing anyway, and I'm here to share it. So, to kind of talk about what the format of these pods will look like, because I'm sure it's a curious perspective to think of it as a rehab. Um, this is going to be a lot of self reflection. And I want you to know it's going to come with no judgment because I am realizing that we can all be delusional at different times in our life and about different things. You know, every delusion I'm going to speak about in this series going forward, there's been a lot of silent work in the background for me of getting control over those things, um, in all areas: work, relationships, my own self-worth and self-esteem, which we're going to dig into definitely in this first episode. And I think that it's really easy to see someone have those traits or emulate those traits on social media or in public. And you think that that's all that they're made of, but we're made up of a lot of different parts and a lot of different qualities of us that brought us to that place. And we're certainly not perfect. So just know that that's the setting, that's the tone and the vibe. It's a non judgment zone. So before we start on the topic, I wanted to take a second to just have you check in with yourself. I'll check in with myself. It is Saturday night. I've been having a great weekend in comparison to the last several that have been related to illness, as I'm a new mom. So, daycare life and sickness, therefore. But, you know, I don't want to just say, "Oh, I'm fine, same stuff, different day." It's like, no, really acknowledge where you are right now, because if you don't think that you're in a place to be able to listen to a personal development topic like this and take it as a learning instead of a self-criticism, I would absolutely suggest that you press pause right here and pick up on this when you're ready. Anytime I have a therapy session, so I do go to a couple different professionals for things related to, different phases of my life that I've had with anxiety and depression, but then also just current partners in crime, so to speak, with my mental health. And whenever I go into a session like that, I intentionally wait for a time when I know that the message is going to be best worked through. And I don't just bring up any old topic in therapy. I bring up the one that I'm really ready to dive into. So, this is all about self-worth, and just know that going into this. There could be some feelings. It's probably for the best that you're having them though. So, let's start right off with the first delusion in the Delusion Rehab podcast. The delusion is that my worth is dependent on my credentials. So while I'm speaking, just begin to think about, where does that delusion fit in your life? Is it something you don't really think about and you don't think affects anything that you're going through? Or Are you giving it a little bit too much of your personal power to pursue credentials? And of course, I'm a definition girl. What is a credential? A qualification, achievement, personal quality, or aspect of a person's background. Now, this is the important part. Typically, when used to indicate that they are suitable for something, that you're suitable for something. So I'm just going to start right off because we're honest in this pod right from the get go. I'm going to just go through some of the examples of where my suitability, so to speak, was challenged in life. And it'll probably help you get to know me a little better. So you probably noticed that the episode title is Who Are You Impressing? And I think that when we pursue credentials, it's for the hope and intent that it is viewed by the person looking at our credentials that we're all that we're the shish, so to speak. And I think that I've probably been doing that most of my life without even knowing it. Going through public school, I went to a very, I would say, prestigious for a high school community. It was, somewhat rural area in Pennsylvania. I graduated from Boyertown High School in 2010, and I ended up applying to King's College in Wilkes-Barre. It was the class of 2014, and I was taught that grades were everything. And I'm not saying that that was my parents, and I'm not saying that that was the teachers, and I'm not saying that that was friends. It was all of it. I think that the thought is you know that your future rides on only what you can give in your public school years. So there's a little intimidation there. And I managed to stay in the top 15% of my class in high school, and I was in different honors and AP classes and like I had over a 4.0, not to brag, but I can't brag because I was still like number 65 in the class of I think 550. Still only the top 15%. Um, Actually, one of my very good friends ended up being valedictorian, and I think I really looked at her journey and thought, "If I could only aspire to be that," and I just kept running after, kept going after it. So, when it came to applying for King's, there was an honors program there, and you had to submit SAT scores in order to see if you were applicable. I had just recently got my SATs back. I killed it in writing and math, but for reading, I got a 500, which I believe it's out of 800 per section, which doesn't sound entirely terrible until you realize that the program would only let you in if you had a reading score on the SATs of 550. And I was devastated because here was an example of I'm a top 15 percenter and I'm going to a private college and I can't get into honors because of a credential that I did not meet. That kind of humbled me. I'm like, all right. So, ironically, I got roomed with a dear, dear friend who I roomed with her for all 4 years. And she's still the best friend to ever come into your life because she's been there 14, 15 years now, something like that. And she probably read me like a book when she found out that I applied for honors and didn't get in. I mean, I can see it on her face now. She's probably like, "Yeah, Laura, you were like not keeping cool about it at all." But I also remember hearing, even from her, that while she was in the honors program, it was way too much work to even consider putting on top of the work that you already had for your major. And heaven forbid you wanted to have a social life, romantic life, extracurricular of any type. And I just want to take that first example to say status doesn't always put you in a position that you're capable for. And it's not to say that you're not good enough. It's not to say you can't keep up with the Joneses. It's really because you have identified that status to mean that you can do that thing. And That's not everyone's story, and statuses can be very arbitrary, especially depending on who is the one giving the credential out, and I do not feel like I missed out on a lot. I don't think that I missed out on a big, big resume booster. I'm proud of all my friends that went and got to experience that, but I'm not disappointed in myself because it defeats the pride of being awesome in writing and math. I was in the 700 to 750 range, and I'm in a job that is writing and math every day. So I feel like I definitely got to look back and say, okay, I might have had a little FOMO at the time, but in the end, it was just a credential that someone arbitrarily made. All right, second example, bigger one. So while I was in college, I was going in as a business administration major, and I kind of figured I would maybe tailor it to be a little more specified. But I didn't know really what I wanted to do. And so I had a professor tell me that I was very strong in accounting compared to my counterparts and that I should really consider making that my major. And he also said that he thought that I should run after getting a CPA. I didn't know at the time what I wanted to do with the accounting degree, but I knew that that seemed to be like a really hot ticket credential. Like if you got that, you can basically work wherever you want, make all the money you want, work all you want, just basically live the financial dream. And I also took for granted my skill set, I would say, in academics. And I said that I was going to study for this thing. And I, was freshly out of college. Freshly out of college, like 1 or 2 years out. And it was not only something that I was being incentivized by my current company to get, to stay in the department, to, stay on a track that kept me moving up in the company, but I had a boyfriend who had it. I had people in my life that made it seem like it was the epitome of what you needed to do. And I would be like, "Oh, yeah, I'll study for a weekend." And then I would go visit that boyfriend for a weekend because I had a long distance relationship life for about 8 years. Um, and I just made that all about what I wanted. And so the problem came when I realized that skill cannot just be translated to a certification for public accounting. Um, I did not study hardly enough, and I think I knew that going in, but I also think that I wanted to prove to myself whether or not I really wanted this. So, if you've ever gone for the CPA exam, you need to take 4 different parts of it. Not to bore all the details, but you needed a 75 or higher to pass one part of the exam. And really, by you getting a 75 or more, it's not to say that you got a C, it's just to say you're in the top 25% of the people that took this test. So they figure that you are the cream of the crop when you're taking it. And when I tell you, I got a 74 on 3 different parts in a row. And I took that as a major red flag. I remember sitting at my piano and saying out loud, "What if someone told me I didn't have to do this anymore? I didn't have to try to go after the CPA." And the second I said it out loud, I followed it up with, "Well, no one told you that you had to do that. There were a lot of people that suggested it and gave you reason to believe you should, but no one ever told you to do that." So I needed to figure out why I was even aiming for it. And when it came down to it, it was because I was deeply admirable of the people that had that skill. And I thought that they would be deeply admirable of me if I also had it. So just take a moment there because I think it's important to realize that there are things in life that we go after because someone else we love goes after them. But that doesn't make us more loved by that person, does it? Not necessarily. If it does, that might be a relationship to consider where you're at with it because relationships are meant to be loving, partnerships regardless of status and regardless of skill. And it was just clear to me that I thought that I could be somebody with that credential. And there's another example of me trying to put my worth somewhere it didn't belong. Third example, most recent example, social media. So, it's actually kind of hilarious that in the same week, I had been given the opportunity to be a quote unquote influencer for the gluten free expo in the Mohegan Sun Casino on the last Saturday of the month. And that was so exciting to me because, I felt like, oh, who am I? Yet they think that I'm worthy enough for this position to actually put myself out there and show, my followers and my connections, like what I really enjoy about the gluten free life and what I like to partake in. And that pretty much same week, I decided to apply to be part of a group that basically majorly supports some of the tools that I've used to plan and schedule my life. And I felt like I poured my heart out in this application. I just said, "Look, like I'm a small fish in the pond, but I love these tools and I love this stuff." And they declined me because I didn't have a certain number of followers. And I say that to say this: be cautious of who you decide to associate with because of how they value people. Okay. And I still love all of the things that that company does. And I still love all of what I've learned from it. But I definitely found myself applying because I thought that that was going to have me respected by the company themselves and give me another opportunity to have passive income for my family in the midst of the economy that we're in. And that's not what value is supposed to be. I should have value from what I'm sharing, what I am giving to those that need assistance and just need guidance and help. And this is actually really vulnerable for me to say because in the back of my head right now, I'm like, am I really saying this? I'm really saying this. I debated talking about this, but it's true. When you get put in a position, no matter where you are on social media, you're putting yourself out there to be vulnerable. And that is actually part of the reason why I almost didn't even do this podcast. I had about 2 or 3 years of debating this. I didn't know what topic it was gonna be, that was for starters, but the second thing was I was really just feeling discouraged that, you have to be a certain type of person or of a certain caliber to do a pod, and I just didn't feel like I had that. Um, but that was all just me thinking that I didn't have it because of what I thought you needed to be and do to make an impact. And so I'm going to jump right into the reasons why this delusion is so dangerous. Credentials only mean something to the people you're around. So I have a master's degree in supply chain. Nobody cares. And I say that, you know, kind of with a half hearted joke, but no, truthfully, the only people that care are the employers that want to see it. And I can proudly state that I went to Penn State University online to get it. I desire much more respect than just from my employer, and yet going after the credential, it's just basically saying that that's all I want. And I know that that's not the real me. So consider the fact that if there's any credential you're going after right now, or you're thinking like that would get me where I need to go, would it get you where you need to go with that employer or that person you love? Or would it get you where you want to go? Like really think about what makes you happy and brings you joy. And if it's not aligning, there's a disconnect there. If you're so focused, like I've been, on credentials, it can keep you from confidently sharing your strengths. And like I said, I was not even sure that I would want to do this podcast because I thought, well, sometimes you just don't want to exist when you see how many problems you have, and yet I'm going to display them. Yeah, let's try it, because honestly, giving of yourself, putting yourself in a vulnerable place actually creates connection. I don't know if you listen to Brene Brown, but she talks about that all the time, that vulnerability is a superpower. She, of all of us, knows how hard it can be to be honest with what our truth is, which is usually messy. And that's okay, because if we were honest with ourselves, we know that everyone is messy. And I super hope that I am not the only one on this pod that has these things going on in their life or these stories to tell, because it means that you also have a story to tell to create impact in others' lives. And thinking that a credential is going to be the reason that you can speak up, that's just delusional, girl or guy. It's not it's not going to get you where you want, which is to leave an impact and have a purpose that goes beyond what a piece of paper says about your title or status. And do you notice that certain credentials get so popular? Like, it tends to make people feel completely shut out of professions or roles, because they're like, there's way too many people in that role. There's way too many people in that position. I could never find myself there. Who told you that? Perhaps a pessimistic career person who felt they needed to play reality with you, or you heard something on the news that discouraged you, or you heard about AI and what that could mean for everybody. Um, but we're not honestly talking about many positives of AI, which is also far surmountable. People that come in the negative light, they find themselves constantly bringing this up, that, you might want to get a real estate license, but doesn't everybody? Like that kind of vibe. And I just need to shout out my husband David on this, because my David, my David, that's what I do call him. I guess that's a level of vulnerability. He has a podcast with his friends Naveen and Matt called What's on Tap. And it is sports obsession at its core. He has wanted to do that for years. And even when I first met him, he said, I would always love to do that. I just don't know if I could get anyone to do it with me. And Matt and Naveen jumped right on it with him. They've been running it the last couple years. I've been going upstairs at like 9 o'clock at night so he can record like almost every Wednesday. And it is just so passionate that he's got me listening to these podcasts, which, if you think I have any acumen beyond knowing that I'm an Eagles fan and that Jalen Hurts is a hero, that's about it. So seeing him with a passion, a laptop, and a microphone to be plugged into the laptop is all he really needed to do it. And he showed me that I could do it too. If he had put himself out there as having all of this expertise and all of this skill and looking down on me saying, oh, maybe one day you could do it, that would discourage me to no end. He's my husband and would not do that. But I think that we think that a lot of other people in our lives are going to put us in positions that make us feel lesser than, because we're not something. And I cannot tell you how many times I've had to think to myself, based off of the personal development app that I use, Growth Day, and different avenues of podcasts and YouTube channels and that I subscribe to, that talk about the fact that you could just as easily get into the mindset of starting small is not worth starting. That's a future pod. We're not going to talk about that right now, but it's relating to how it's a little embarrassing to be seen starting small. It's not something that I feel super comfortable with myself, but I know that if it doesn't take a credential to give to others and to be purposeful with your actions, then I'm not going to look at my small start as anything more than a blessing that I got to start. So I wanted to leave a couple takeaways here. These pods, I do want to try to leave them about 30 minutes. So it's maybe about a commute's worth of content for you. And I'm going to leave you with a couple words that stick in my mind when I think about this topic, but then also a little surprise at the end. So many people are looking at qualities that are character based, first of all, rather than credentials. We pursue them to no end and we make them all about what our schooling is and our career is and how we want to say we've developed ourselves and make our LinkedIn like perfection. But the credentials really just get you in front of the people that you might want to talk to. By the time you get to them and they know that you're competent to do the job, it's going to come down to character and quality every time because they see you for what you can do and can be. Passions don't always fit in a box and definitely not a degree or title. And I was talking about AI briefly. I think that's going to open up a whole new set of career paths that have never existed before. So we're not even ready necessarily with the skills, but we have built all of the quality of our character up until now, and that's not going anywhere, hopefully. I find it to be very complicated to work with coworkers that only respect someone for their title and credentials. It's kind of sickening to me. Um, that was some honesty that just came out. Hope that wasn't too raw, but I see people sometimes that they will put themselves up for full surrender because someone has a title above them or someone feels that they are unworthy to even be associated with somebody. I have had a cool moment where I've had several conversations with, I'll say, people that are like 2 to 3 layers above me in the org chart. And they are normal freaking people, bottom line. And I have had some really funny conversations. Like there was this one time that I was sitting in a meeting with one of those executives. She was a woman and she looked at me and she said, "Was I a little too mean to that vendor?" And I just looked at her like I was looking at my mom and I said, "No, you were the right amount of savage." And we laughed. We had a good, happy moment that I think is not something that everyone can even dream of having because the title and credential is looked at so highly that it's hard to even see past it to get to the who the person is. And failure in any of this is only a perspective. So if you see a failure in not meeting a credential, like I didn't meet the SAT score I needed, I didn't succeed so highly at the CPA exam, but I ended up finding that I more desire a totally different topic inside of accounting. I love inventory, like to the point that now I call looking in my cabinets, taking inventory, going through my clothing as if I'm going through a self audit of my own department. It is so funny to watch people have no idea that that's what I like to do. But knowing that I wouldn't even have been able to pursue it had any of the things in the past worked in the direction I thought it was going to go. I have had amazing opportunities because the things I mentioned before didn't work. Because I was not in the honors program in college, I got to be part of the best experience of my whole life. Cantoris Christi Regis choir in King's College, all 4 years. It blessed my life so much. I'm still dear, dear friends with the director and his wife, and it is so touching to my heart that I got to be a part of it. And again, I don't think it would have realistically happened by me being in the honors program. I did get a job in inventory, which I like much more than the idea of a CPA life, and like no shade to CPAs. I just had to learn the hard way by spending a grand or two on CPA exam fees to figure out that I didn't like it. And that wasn't fun, but at the same time, I look back at it and I do say to myself now, thank God I didn't get a CPA. It's amazing to me but it's only because my alignment would have been so incredibly off. So, what I thought would be a really fun surprise for this pod is I'm very musically inclined, as I just mentioned. I was part of Cantoris Christi Regis, and much like an Andy Bernard in The Office, um, an a cappella singer, totally devoted to music. I'm even in the worship team at my church now, where I both play piano and sing, and I'm fully inspired in this area. But I am also super into EDM, tropical house. Apparently, a lot of European DJs that show up to the States like every 2 years, and I don't know if I'm ever going to see any of these people live. I hope to one day, but so many of their songs, while they're not Christian or faith based, they speak to things that are like the real deal life. And I don't know if you've noticed this about EDM and all those happy vibe songs. It's a very high energy, upbeat vibe, followed by lyrics that are so painful and so gut wrenching. And you're like, wow, I think the only way they could have ever said that out loud is if they sang it in the most happy go lucky tune you could ever hear. And I decided that for this pod, every podcast in the show notes, you can find an EDM song and a faith based song that both speak to me on this topic. Um, since this is the first pod, I had to start with the song Beautiful by Kygo and Sandro Cavazza. Top 5 song easily. It has meant so much to me in the most vulnerable times of my life. A lot of hard goodbyes to jobs and relationships, and to also the times where I realized that the only thing I can be is authentic, meaning I have no choice but to be authentic in this situation. And I'm fearful that it's not going to be enough for that person, for that job, for that organization. But I have to love myself anyway because I was authentic, bottom line. I have listened to this song so many times. I think I even saw I was in like the 0.05% of listeners of Kygo, and I'm sure it was because of this song. Um, Spotify does not lie at the end of the year. So take time to listen to this song. And even though it'll probably be one of your favorites too, it talks about the true colors. It talks about asking the questions. If I let my guard down and rip up my scars, will you still find me beautiful? Like, ugh, I love that. I love that someone would be so willing to be vulnerable to the point that even if they're not seen as beautiful by everybody around them, that they can inherently know that they are. And the second song is called Fighting Words by Ellie Holcomb. And my mom and I went to a women's conference about, I'd say like 7 or 8 years ago now. And it was right on the cusp of when I needed a breakthrough in my self-esteem. Like I was very much like pouring all of myself into a job or the relationship I had at the time. Like it was either my company or my loved one every day. It was like I went to work and I wanted my company to tell me they loved me. And when I came home, I wanted my boyfriend to tell me that he loved me. It was like a back and forth, like someone just tell me that I'm worth something, please. Um, very, very humbling. The words to this song talk about the fact that we have to fight the devil off and his lies with the words and all the truths of who Christ says we are. And that is so perfect in how I want you to end this pod. Listening to those two songs, downloading them to your Spotify, absolutely. And remembering that your worth is not a resume, it's not a credential, it's not a title, and it's definitely not a career. And when you think that your failures or imperfections will cancel out all your hard work because you were striving so hard to get those credentials, just know that no failure or imperfection will ever be big enough to take your worth away. Thank you for listening. I'm so glad you guys are enjoying this already. Hit like, subscribe, make sure that you get in touch with me if there's a topic you're really curious about, and I will talk to you next time so we can work out our delusions together.